Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing my setup for my April bullet journal theme, and the theme I chose for April is Ukrainian folk art, specifically the Petrykivka style. The resources that I used to learn this style of artwork will be in the description. There are several sites that I referred to very thoroughly, just because this is another culture's folk art tradition, and I always want to make sure that if I am depicting a cultural tradition, I want to be doing it justice. I don't want to be taking too many liberties or inserting too much of my own style. So I tried to work off of templates and use existing artistic patterns or templates and rearrange elements and rearrange color palettes, but not to adjust too dramatically. So this first page is my cover page, and I actually drew, you'll see I have on the left a printout. I actually made that in Procreate and printed it out just because I've already packed away all my paints. I'm about to move, and traditionally this style is done with paints, but I only have colored pencils still unpacked. So I had done this in Procreate trying to evoke the paint style, but I didn't love how it printed out. I just felt like it was missing some of the, roughness that you would get with paint or with colored pencil. So I did copy it and I used color pencil. My pencils are Prismacolor. I love how they blend. So I did blue and yellow, since those are the colors of the Ukrainian flag. And for the quote, I have a poem by Ilya Kaminsky, who is a Ukrainian poet. I highly encourage you to look at the text of the poem. I will have that in the description as well. My apologies if my voice is a little bit off in this video. I'm currently sick with a cold and my voice is not cooperating with me, so I'm doing my best. But then this second spread is for my goals and habit tracker. I have the similar order that I usually do every month. And I'm using a border template here for a Petrykivka pattern, and I've got the colors green and pink, since those feel very April and very springy. And traditionally with Petrykivka painting, you wouldn't even put down a pencil sketch guideline. That's one of the things that makes it so, there's a lot of things that make it really interesting, but masters don't ever sketch out the guide. And I'm obviously an amateur, so I sketched out every single one of mine. This next spread is for my diary, or highlight of the day I used to call them, but diary is a little bit more accurate. And here I'm using, I think I showed you a template of a big red poppy from this blog, and I'm replacing it with a sunflower, since the sunflower is the Ukrainian national flower. And I'm also giving it the blue and yellow color scheme. Those are the colors of the Ukrainian flag, I think I mentioned. And I am also going to have in the description a charity, if anybody feels so moved to give, to help support Ukrainians who are currently fighting a war and being invaded. And that was why I decided to do this theme. It's just so terrible that this is happening, and trying to do my bit. So I like to explore different cultures' folk art traditions. The last time I did this was November of 2021. I did a Norwegian rose mauling theme which was really fun, and I really enjoyed doing it. And I have been wanting to do kind of like a journey around the world, if that makes sense, of doing different countries' folk art traditions and learning more about, you know, how different places traditionally made art and sort of made sense of the world around them. And yeah, I just think that that's such a fascinating element of art history and kind of human history. And it's so different everywhere you go. Every place has such different artistic traditions. So this is Ukraine's artistic tradition. This is only one facet. There's obviously many different facets of Ukrainian art history, and this is only one very small facet. But if this interests you, I highly recommend you follow some of the links in my description. I linked everything that helped me, particularly the site Authentic Ukraine had a bunch of really good portals or kind of, you know, windows to more discovery if you're interested in other elements of Ukrainian history or culture. But yeah, so I'm doing this big sunflower, and some of the elements that you're seeing here that are particularly Petrykivka are the leaves with the giant saw-toothed edges, and the I think they're called grains or seeds, which kind of go together to fill spaces. So you'll have groups of 2 or 3 or more seeds that fill empty space, and lots of small foliage taking up empty space. One of the elements of Petrykivka painting that I was really struggling to achieve with colored pencils is the 2 colors on the brush element. So frequently the painter would have the brush coated in one color and then they would dip into a second color, so that when you would paint, the first color wears off to reveal the second color, if that makes sense. I'm trying to mimic it on the edges of the petals and of the leaves, where you'd have the dark color on the outside and then it would reveal the lighter color. But I think it really could use a brush being dipped in sort of more of a gouache or acrylic. I think would do it really well. I don't think it would work with watercolor. And then I'm also using a couple of different washi tapes just to supplement the spread. I didn't want anything that was going to be too distracting or too strong of an opposing, I should say, artistic sensibility. So I had a couple of washi tapes from Michaels that felt related to this style. And then I also have a very blank black and white grid washi tape that I used a few times. And then I have a floral tape that I use near the end. And I feel like that's always a pretty good rule of thumb if you're doing a really bold theme that has a lot of personality and has a really strong kind of artistic sensibility. You don't want washi tapes or kind of colored pencils or markers or whatever that are going to compete at all with that. You want it to complement. This spread is for my expense tracker and my playlist of the month, and I'm using a template which was originally in blue and yellow, and I substituted varying shades of pink for all the shades of blue. I usually find that that is another trick that works really well if you're trying to understand why the artist made the choices that they did, to try and go in and recreate their work with different colors but the same values for each color. So if one color is really intense, then your new color palette, that color has to stay intense. It just helps you understand what each color is supposed to be accomplishing. In terms of the symbols and motifs you're seeing here, some of the motifs that you see a lot in Petrykivka paintings are chrysanthemums, which I believe these pink flowers are chrysanthemums. You will also see dahlias, asters, roses, lots of flowers. As I mentioned, lots of the sawtoothed leaves, which traditionally I think they used cat hair brushes to pull out the spikes from the leaves, and lots of little floral and foliage flourishes filling up the empty spaces. This next spread is for my YouTube tracker and my growth/content tracker. And this one is inspired by Tatiana Pata, who was one of the most famous artisans from the 20th century for Petrykivka painting. So this is inspired by, I'll leave the piece in the description that this is kind of riffing off of. I used the leaves in particular from her painting, and I just tried to put clumps of foliage throughout the spread. This is always what's so tricky about using such a bold sort of art style. It makes it hard to do little pieces here and there, if that makes sense, to intersperse throughout the theme. So it means that I have to keep the rest of the theme super simple to not look overdone, to not look like there's too much on the page, which is definitely a lesson that I've been learning way more recently, moderation. When I go back to some of my first videos that I did on this channel, or even when I was just getting into bullet journaling, which I had done for a few years before I started filming. I always want to tell myself that's too much, you know, like I love to do a lot, as you can see obviously by my theme choices. You know, I'm very much a maximalist, and I love color, and I love all these different textures and things. But sometimes if you put too much on the page, you just lose appreciation for what it is by kind of drowning it with too many noises or too many different competing things for the eye. So that is one of the kind of tricks of working with a art form that is this intense, is you really have to give it space to breathe, and you can't try and ask too much from each page. This next spread is probably my favorite that I made for this theme. This was my attempt to do an exact duplicate of a masterwork that I found on the Authentic Ukraine site. I searched high and low across the internet to find the artist behind this work. I could only find the photographer's name. The photographer was Levhen Evenbach. But if you are able to find the artist's name behind this work, please send it to me and I'll add like a subtitle or something. So I believe this is a chrysanthemum motif, and I'll have the original piece linked in the description. A bunch of these sawtooth leaves in a very dark green, and they are kind of veined through with silver, and then just you've got this giant blooming chrysanthemum in the middle, and then some buds around it, and lots of ferns and foliage, and the seeds filling up the empty space. That was definitely one of the sort of tips or tricks that I learned when I was kind of teaching myself this art style. Even if you think it's not going well, the trick is just to fill the space. So you can't leave empty spaces. Try and work with a variety of motifs. So if you fill the whole space with just the sawtooth leaves, it's not going to look as good as if you have a couple of different motifs. So you've got the leaves, you've got the little pollen kind of stem things coming down from each flower. You've got the little fern foliage things, and then there's little fern vines as well. So just different kinds of things to fill the space. And this is for a wedding planning spread. As I've mentioned before, I'm trying to plan my wedding, and so I try and make a dedicated spot for that every month with what I need to do, just so I can keep track of my own tasks. But yeah, I really love how this spread turned out. I think it came out really beautiful. This last spread is also done in blue and yellow, just like I think the majority of my spreads ended up being blue and yellow, which was only sort of on purpose. It's also just a really nice color combination, and as well as a tribute to Ukraine. And then the quote at the bottom of this page is from a Ukrainian poet who lived much of his life in exile in Russia. And one of his most famous poems was called The Testament. But this poem from which I've drawn this quote is actually called "The Sunsets and the Mountains Darken," and it's about longing for Ukraine and kind of wanting to go home, which is such a horrible feeling that I am lucky to have never experienced that feeling of being a refugee and of being forced to flee my own homeland and having nowhere to go really, and having to rely on strangers, and the pain of knowing that you can't go home, and that your home might even be being destroyed. So yeah, not really the most fun theme, I guess, the most lighthearted, but I don't know, sometimes things are just serious, and I hope you guys enjoyed this theme. I hope you enjoyed a chance to see that, you know, it's not all, I don't know, I feel like sometimes you can focus on the doom and gloom and the dark things about what you're hearing about a certain country or about things, but I guess part of what's so heartbreaking is, you know, as I was doing research for this video, is, you know, so many of these masterworks that I've been copying or learning from, they're in museums in Dnipro, and they might not be standing still, you know, they might have been destroyed, and it's just really horrible. You know, the artisans who've made these, I don't know what's happened to them. I don't know how they're doing. The best case scenario is that they've had to flee their homes. So yeah, if you have money, I can direct you to the donations places I will have in the description. If all you have is goodwill or prayers or good thoughts to send, those are also more than welcome. But yeah, I hope this theme helped you find a little bit of inspiration, helped you find a little bit of joy in the beauty of a different culture's tradition and a different culture's artistic history, because I know I love getting to see these beautiful artworks and getting to practice making them. And even if it's sad, it also reminds me, you know, many of these things were made during times of great conflict and great strife, and now is no different. You know, people are still making art right now. So I hope you guys enjoyed this theme. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.